Monaco Palace, March 15, 1976. The phone call came at 3:17 a.m. Grace Kelly was jolted awake by the sound, her heart immediately racing with the primal fear every parent knows. Something was wrong with one of her children. "Your Serene Highness," the voice was urgent, barely controlled. "It's about Princess Caroline. She's been taken." Grace's world collapsed in an instant. Caroline, her 18-year-old daughter, had vanished from her university dormitory in Paris. But this wasn't a simple kidnapping for ransom. The caller's next words chilled Grace to the bone. "You have 24 hours to make a choice. Your daughter's life, or the secret you've been hiding for 20 years. Decide." The line went dead. Grace sat in the darkness of her bedroom, her hands shaking as she held the phone. She knew exactly what secret the caller meant. The one thing she had sworn to take to her grave, the truth that would destroy not just her own reputation, but the entire Monaco royal family. For 2 decades, Grace had protected that secret at any cost. Now she had to choose: save her daughter or save the crown. The clock was ticking. 24 hours to make an impossible decision that would change everything forever. Grace immediately called palace security, but deep down she knew they couldn't help her. This wasn't about money or political demands. This was personal. Someone knew about her secret and was using her daughter's life to force the truth into the light. The secret Grace had been hiding went back to 1956, the year she married Prince Rainier. What the world didn't know was that Grace Kelly hadn't been a virgin bride. 3 months before her wedding, she had discovered she was pregnant. But the father wasn't Prince Rainier. It was William Holden, her co-star from The Bridges at Toko-Ri. Grace and Bill had had a passionate affair during filming, and Grace had fallen deeply in love with him. When Grace discovered her pregnancy, she faced an impossible situation. She was already engaged to Rainier. The wedding invitations had been sent. The whole world was watching. Grace made a desperate decision. She told no one about the pregnancy, not even William Holden. Instead, she quietly arranged to have the pregnancy terminated at a private clinic in Switzerland, just 2 weeks before her wedding to Rainier. It was the most painful decision of her life, but Grace believed it was the only way to protect everyone she loved. What Grace didn't know was that someone at the clinic had taken photographs. Someone had documented her secret and had been waiting 20 years for the right moment to use them. Now that moment had come. Grace rushed to her private study and opened a safe hidden behind a portrait of her children. Inside were the documents she had hoped never to see again. Medical records, clinic receipts, and most damning of all, photographs that proved she had lied to the world about her past. As Grace stared at the evidence of her long-buried secret, her phone rang again. "I see you understand the situation now," the same voice said. "Your daughter is safe for the moment, but that will change if you don't do exactly what I say." "What do you want?" Grace whispered. "I want you to call a press conference for tomorrow afternoon. I want you to tell the world the truth about your marriage to Prince Rainier. I want you to admit that you deceived everyone, that your fairy tale romance was built on lies." Grace felt sick. "If I do that, it will destroy my family. My children will be humiliated. Rainier will—" "Your choice, princess. Your daughter's life or your family's reputation. You have 23 hours and 14 minutes to decide." The line went dead again. Grace sank into her chair, overwhelmed by the impossible situation. If she revealed her secret, it would not only destroy her own reputation, but would call into question the legitimacy of her marriage and her children's royal status. The scandal could bring down the entire Monaco monarchy. But if she didn't, Caroline would die. Grace made her first desperate call to William Holden in Los Angeles. After 20 years of silence, she had to reach out to the man who had been the love of her life. "Bill," Grace said when he answered. "It's Grace. I need your help." William Holden was now 58 years old, still handsome but worn down by years of alcoholism. When he heard Grace's voice, he was transported back to 1955 and their passionate affair. "Grace? My God, I haven't heard from you since our baby," Grace finished quietly. There was a long silence. William had never known about the pregnancy. Grace was telling him for the first time that they had created a life together and that she had ended it without ever giving him a choice. "Grace, what are you talking about?" Grace told him everything. The pregnancy, the clinic in Switzerland, the photographs, and now Caroline's kidnapping. William was devastated. "You were carrying our child and you never told me." "I couldn't. I was engaged to Rainier. The whole world was watching. I thought it was the only way to protect everyone. Protect everyone except our baby," William said bitterly. Grace was crying now. Bill, I've regretted that decision every day for 20 years, but right now I need your help to save Caroline. Someone knows about what happened, and they're using it to destroy my family." William was quiet for a long moment. Despite his anger and pain, he still loved Grace. He always had. "What do you need me to do?" Grace explained her desperate plan. She needed William to help her find out who was blackmailing her. Someone with access to the Swiss clinic records, someone who had been planning this for years. "I think it might be Dr. Heinrich Muller," Grace said. "He was the doctor who performed the procedure. He retired years ago, but he might have kept records." William agreed to fly to Switzerland immediately to confront Dr. Muller while Grace searched for clues in Monaco. As Grace hung up the phone, she realized she had just set in motion a chain of events that would either save Caroline or destroy everything she had built over the past 20 years. Time was running out. Grace had 21 hours left to save her daughter's life. Grace's next call was to her head of security, Captain Jacques Moreau. She couldn't tell him the whole truth, but she needed his help to track down Caroline's kidnappers. "Captain, I need you to check every contact Princess Caroline has made in the past month. Phone calls, letters, visitors. Someone has been watching her, planning this." Captain Moreau was confused. "Your Serene Highness, shouldn't we contact the French police? The FBI?" "No," Grace said firmly. "This is a private matter. We handle it ourselves." Grace spent the next 6 hours going through Caroline's personal belongings looking for any clue about who might have taken her. She found something disturbing in Caroline's bedroom, photographs that had been sent anonymously, showing Grace entering and leaving a building in Switzerland in 1956. Someone had been stalking her family for months, maybe years. At noon, Grace received another call. 16 hours left, Princess. Have you made your decision?" "I want proof that my daughter is alive," Grace demanded. A few minutes later, a photograph was delivered to the palace. It showed Caroline tied to a chair in what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse holding a newspaper with today's date. Grace studied the photograph desperately, looking for any clue about Caroline's location. In the background, she could see part of a sign in French. It looked like Caroline was being held somewhere in the French countryside, probably within driving distance of Monaco. Grace made a decision that would have shocked the world if they had known about it. The proper princess, the elegant former actress, decided to take matters into her own hands. She put on dark clothes, grabbed a gun from Rainier's collection, and slipped out of the palace without telling anyone where she was going. Grace Kelly, Princess of Monaco, was about to become a vigilante to save her daughter's life. Using clues from the photograph and her knowledge of the region, Grace drove through the French countryside, checking abandoned buildings and warehouses. She had 12 hours left to find Caroline before the deadline. Grace's first stop was a derelict factory near Cannes. She parked her car in the shadows and approached the building carefully, her heart pounding. The gun felt heavy and unfamiliar in her hand. Princess Grace had never imagined she would one day be stalking through abandoned buildings with a weapon, but maternal instinct had transformed her into something she never knew she could be. The factory was empty, but Grace found signs that someone had been there recently. Cigarette butts, empty food containers, tire tracks in the mud. Someone was using these abandoned places as hideouts. Grace returned to her car and drove to the next location on her mental list. Hours passed. Each empty building brought her closer to panic. What if she was wrong about the location? What if Caroline was being held somewhere else entirely? Meanwhile, in Switzerland, William Holden was conducting his own desperate investigation. The meeting with Dr. Muller had given him the name Pierre Dubois, but finding him was proving difficult. William spent hours going through old clinic records, making phone calls to former employees, following every lead. He discovered that Pierre Dubois had a history of mental instability and drug addiction. After being fired from the clinic, he had blamed everyone else for his downfall, especially the famous patients who had made the clinic wealthy. He became obsessed with Princess Grace, Dr. Muller told William during their second meeting. He would talk about her constantly, about how she had everything while he had nothing. "I should have seen the signs, should have reported him to the police." "Where would he take Caroline?" William pressed. "Does he have property, family, connections in France?" Dr. Muller thought for a moment. "His brother owns a trucking business. They have warehouses throughout southern France. Pierre used to visit them when he needed money." William immediately called Grace with this information, but her phone kept going to voicemail. Grace was deep in the French countryside, out of cell range, following her own desperate leads. By 10 p.m., Grace had checked 6 different locations. She was running out of time and hope. 8 hours until the deadline, and she was no closer to finding Caroline. That's when Grace spotted the warehouse that matched the photograph. It was an abandoned textile factory about 40 miles from Monaco, exactly the kind of isolated place a kidnapper might use. Grace parked her car a quarter-mile away and approached the building on foot. Every shadow seemed to hide danger, every sound made her jump. But Grace pressed forward, driven by a mother's desperate love. She circled the building twice, looking for the best way in. Most of the windows were boarded up, but she found one on the ground floor where the boards had rotted away. Grace squeezed through the window, tearing her expensive dress on the jagged frame. The Princess of Monaco was crawling through a broken window in an abandoned factory, and she didn't care about anything except finding her daughter. Inside, the building was dark and silent. Grace used her phone's flashlight to navigate through debris and abandoned machinery. The smell of rust and decay filled her nostrils. Then she heard it, Caroline's voice, faint but unmistakable, coming from somewhere above. Grace found a stairway and began climbing, each step creaking ominously under her weight. Her heart was pounding so loudly she was afraid the kidnapper might hear it. On the second floor, Grace could see a light coming from a room at the far end of the hallway. She crept forward, staying close to the wall, the gun ready in her trembling hands. As Grace got closer, she could hear the conversation more clearly. "Your mother thinks she's so perfect," Pierre Dubois was saying. "Princess Grace, the fairy tale bride. But I know the truth about her. I know what she did in Switzerland." "I don't know what you're talking about," Caroline replied, her voice shaky but defiant. "My mother never hurt anyone. She killed her own baby," Dubois said cruelly. "Before she married your father, she got pregnant with another man's child, and she had it killed so she could be a princess." Grace felt sick hearing her darkest secrets spoken aloud, especially to Caroline. Her daughter was learning the truth in the most horrible way possible. "You're lying," Caroline said, but Grace could hear the doubt in her voice. "I have photographs, medical records, everything. Your perfect mother is a murderer." That's when Grace decided she had heard enough. She couldn't let this madman torture her daughter with distorted versions of her past. Grace parked her car a quarter-mile away and approached the building on foot. She could see a light in one of the upper windows. Using skills she never knew she had, Grace found a way into the building through a broken window. She could hear voices coming from the second floor. As Grace crept up the stairs, she heard Caroline's voice. Her daughter was alive, but she sounded terrified and weak. "Please," Caroline was saying, "I don't know what my mother did wrong, but whatever it is, she'll make it right. Just let me go." Grace's heart broke hearing her daughter's plea. Caroline had no idea what this was really about. Grace reached the second floor and peered around a corner. She could see Caroline tied to a chair in the center of a large room. A man was pacing in front of her, holding a gun. Grace recognized him from old clinic files she had seen years ago. This was Pierre Dubois, Dr. Muller's former assistant. Grace had 4 hours left to save Caroline, but she couldn't wait for backup or negotiate. She had to act now. Grace stepped into the room with her gun drawn. "Let my daughter go," she said, her voice steady despite her terror. Pierre Dubois spun around, surprised to see Grace. "Princess Grace, you're supposed to be preparing for your press conference. The only thing I'm prepared to do is kill you if you don't release Caroline right now." Dubois laughed. "You won't shoot me. You're too proper, too refined. You're not a killer." Grace looked at her daughter, tied and frightened, and felt something change inside her. The proper princess disappeared, replaced by a fierce mother protecting her child. "You're right," Grace said. "I'm not a killer, but I'm a mother, and there's nothing I won't do to protect my child." Grace shot Pierre Dubois in the shoulder, dropping him to the ground. She immediately ran to Caroline and untied her. "Mama!" Caroline cried, throwing her arms around Grace. "I was so scared." "It's over, darling. You're safe now." As they helped each other out of the warehouse, Grace realized she still had a choice to make. Pierre Dubois was wounded but alive. He still had the photographs, the evidence that could destroy her family. Grace could take the evidence and burn it, keep her secret buried forever. Or she could finally tell the truth and free herself from 20 years of hiding. Grace looked at Caroline, her beautiful daughter who had almost died because of secrets and lies. "Caroline," Grace said, "there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you years ago." As they drove back to Monaco, Grace told Caroline the truth about her past, about William Holden, about the pregnancy she had terminated to protect the royal family. Caroline listened without judgment. holding her mother's hand. "Mama," Caroline said when Grace finished, "I don't care what you did 20 years ago. You're my mother, and you saved my life tonight. That's all that matters to me." Grace felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had been carrying for 2 decades. When they returned to the palace, Grace called William Holden to tell him that Caroline was safe and that she had decided to tell their children the truth about their past. "Grace," William said, "I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Even after all these years, even knowing what happened to our baby, I understand why you made the choice you did." "Thank you, Bill. I needed to hear that." Grace never held the press conference. Instead, she quietly arranged for Pierre Dubois to receive medical treatment and psychological help. The evidence he had stolen was destroyed, and Grace's secret remained within her family. But something fundamental had changed that night. Grace realized that the secrets she had been protecting were not worth her family's safety or her own peace of mind. Over the next few years, Grace gradually opened up to her children about her past, about the choices she had made, and the prices she had paid. She became closer to them than she had ever been before. Caroline never spoke publicly about her kidnapping, but she later said it was the night she truly understood who her mother was. Not a perfect princess, but a complex woman who had made difficult choices and lived with the consequences. William Holden visited Monaco several times in the years that followed, forming a friendship with Grace's children, and finally finding some peace about the child they had lost. Grace Kelly died in 1982, 6 years after that terrifying night, but those who knew her said that in her final years, she seemed freer, lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted from her shoulders. The night Grace Kelly had 24 hours to save her daughter's life became the night she finally saved herself from the secrets, the lies, and the perfect image that had been slowly destroying her for 20 years. In the end, Grace discovered that the most important choice wasn't between her daughter's life and her secret. It was between continuing to live a lie and finally embracing the truth about who she really was. She chose truth, and it set them all free. If this story moved you, share it with others who understand that sometimes the greatest courage comes from admitting our mistakes. Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments, would you have made the same choices Grace Kelly did? Don't miss our next video where we reveal another shocking secret about Grace Kelly's final years, the truth about her mysterious car accident, and the conspiracy theory that still haunts Monaco today. Remember, the measure of a parent's love isn't perfection, it's what they're willing to sacrifice to protect their children. Grace Kelly proved that love knows no limits,